The wayfinding landscape is changing, so welcome to Endpoint's Wayfinding Xchange Podcast. We want to connect with leading experts, tech innovators, and key contributors to exchange knowledge and innovation in physical and digital wayfinding. We want to shape the future of wayfinding through discussion, collaboration, and shared expertise. And this is why we have created this podcast series. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Endpoint's Wayfinding Xchange Podcast, presented this time by me, Alison Richings, Wayfinding Design Director here at Endpoint. How does a client team take on the challenges of a brand new museum, particularly when that museum is a groundbreaking amalgamation of multiple museums brought together to create one of the largest cultural institutions in Scandinavia? Well, that's exactly what our guest did today. I'm talking to Ragna Jacobsen, who was at the heart of our client team for the Wayfinding project at the National Museum in Norway. The building opened in 2022 and exhibits Norway's largest collection of art, architecture and design. Ragna is Senior Exhibition Designer at the National Museum in the Education and Visitor Experience Department. Welcome. It's really good to talk to you today.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here talking to you.
Thank you. I think really a good place to start is if we can hear about your role at the National Museum and share a bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, sure. My title is Senior Exhibition Designer. So this role includes, of course, designing exhibits, which I love, doing a lot of production work actually, and taking exhibitions from concept through mounting and install. But it also includes having responsibilities for all the other collaborators and designers that we work with, following up and exchanging ideas and moving projects forward. And these days, almost everything is about exhibition design and mostly temporary exhibitions. Like right now, I'm working on a big Rothko show that's coming in May, opening in May. But before we opened the new museum, we had to wear a lot of hats. And my responsibilities included being the project manager for the signage and wayfinding program, which
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that, actually, which is good for my practice now. I mean, in my department, we try to work holistically. So, we have to think about the visitor journey the whole way, from people, even from before people arrive and entering the building and then visiting the exhibit and so on.
And how did that feel? I just wanted to ask about how that felt, being such a major part of the client team for the Wayfinding project.
Oh, that was a really new thing to me. I mean, it was a pretty steep learning curve, but I think we're having some knowledge of 3D design in combination with the collaboration with the graphic designers, which I'm used to from exhibition design. It was a great fun, and I mean, I didn't know how big of a job it actually is. So many
I know, lots of people say that.
Yeah. I mean, from even naming, I was just thinking about how much that almost become like a project in itself. And, you could probably imagine in a museum, there are a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people that you need to collaborate with that, has an opinion about things.
Absolutely. I totally understand that. So what drove the decision for the National Museum to consolidate into the new museum that we have today?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, technically the National Museum was actually sort of like an umbrella organization for four actually major museums, including the National Gallery with older art, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Design and Crafts Museum, as well as the Museum of Architecture. But it was even, going back to the 2003, it's been a long time. In those days, there was like a political movement or a decision to consolidate a lot of museums, to kind of create these hubs of expertise, to create better offers actually for the visitors. And with the National Museum, there was also a case of a lot of older museum buildings in Oslo that it would take a lot of effort to fix and to, they didn't really meet modern museum standards. And also it was a big need to have larger exhibition spaces, actually, all in all. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important consideration that I don't think we necessarily think about when transforming museums. Bigger space gives you, as exhibition designers, much more opportunity to sort of fill that space in a different way. Whereas in an older museum, smaller rooms, less opportunities.
Yeah, that's true. I love old museum buildings as well, but they have different challenges, of course. So, transportation, getting things into the space, it could be climate control, those kinds of things. Yeah.
That's quite incredible. And what challenges did you encounter during the pre-planning phase when everybody said, right, that's it, we've decided we're going to move, we've got a new building? What were the biggest challenges for you?
I think, as an in-house designer, the most important thing for me was to work with all the people that were creating the spaces for temporary exhibitions. When it comes to the collection, that was a big project just in itself. It was 10,000 square meters with the exhibition. And for me, I had to focus on the temporary exhibition spaces. And this includes the light hall. I don't know if you know about that, but on top of the museum, sort of on the third floor, there is a big space called the light hall because it's kind of semi-transparent with daylight actually coming through if we want to, if we don't pull the curtains down inside the technical wall. And this is very new in terms of a, museum space, very exciting. It can create a special mood, but it's also very challenging because, as you know, a lot of the objects we put on display can't really handle a lot of light. So, we knew this was coming, so we had to come up with ideas for how to work with that, actually.
Yeah, that's quite incredible.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention when you talked about preparing for the new museum was that we had to think about the visitor journey in like a broader sense. Before, most of the design effort was put into the exhibition spaces, but now we had to think about all the public spaces. Like, what does it feel to arrive here? How do people know what, how are they going to know what to do, what they want to do? So that was maybe one of the bigger challenges, actually. And we had to make a lot of informed choices, before the building was even there.
Yeah.
And we're working in collaboration with companies like Endpoint, to come up with this good solution that we knew were going to become fairly permanent. So, yeah, it had to work.
I do remember that you had, and I think you still have, lots of models of the building.
Yeah.
And I remember you placing little scaled versions of the signs to test how they work. I think that visualization of the space is really important as a part of that build-up.
Yeah.
How did you find those sorts of things? Were they actually really helpful?
Well, that was we probably used some of the tools we already knew from creating exhibitions.
Yeah.
And we always try to put ourselves in the visitor's spot, which can sometimes actually be a little bit difficult. We even went to visit the building before it was finished. And I guess I'm one of the people that have seen most of the little crannies and corners of this building, although I'm actually kind of bad at finding my way. So it's...
Well, let's hope that the signs work.
Yeah. They do work. But back of house, we have to depend on ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's also quite interesting because, we think of it as building a new museum, which is for visitors, and it's all about what's going on in the front of house.
Yeah.
But it's also where you work. So for a lot of your week, it's your home, it's your life, and those back of house spaces are yours and they need to work for you. And
Exactly.
I think it's a really interesting part of the process is to think about how back of house works.
Yeah, and I think it works well, actually. There's lots of security issues, of course, so you still have to make it feel friendly and accessible. It's a fine balance because sometimes there are places you can't really visit, like, storage spaces for art, of course, those kinds
Yeah,
of
of
things.
course.
But yeah.
And your, it's a bit of an aside, your staff canteen has still got the best view in the whole world. So
It
it's
does.
brilliant.
Yeah, the harbor of Oslo. So it's
Absolutely
really
lovely.
nice on a sunny day. Yeah.
So what are the primary considerations when designing exhibitions, particularly regarding space utilisation and enhancing the visitor experience?
So it really varies, actually. It really depends on what kind of space you're working with. It's really different to work in the light hall, it's like 7 meters from up to the ceiling, compared to like a more traditional space. And it also depends on the content. If it's an architecture exhibit or an art exhibit, and the storyline, which we often as exhibition designers get to work on with the curatorial team and educators. Sometimes it could take like an unexpected sort of direction. And it also depends on the target audience. Some exhibits are targeted towards a special group or sort of like a person, like a persona. But when it comes to my personal preference, I guess I like there to be a certain logic to the space, so the visitors kind of get it. But I think that needs to be balanced with some kind of magic, like, why are you here? Like, you're not looking at this in your living room on your computer, you're actually in a physical space. So some magic and maybe some surprise. And that could be created just by the artworks, or it could be created by the mood and, the feeling in the space. But exhibition design should always support the content. So often it's fairly subtle,
Yeah. I imagine it's got lots of challenges. As you say, you've got climate control, you've got lighting conditions. Then, as you say, what's the mood and the experience you want visitors to have around the art? Is it really difficult as well to try to translate what an artist thought about something that they designed, created, and how you get that across?
Yeah, that's what we work in phases when we plan an exhibition. And in the concept phase, there are workshops and discussions with the educator, the curator, the designer, to try to kind of come up with ideas and often just understand the content that can be fairly complex, and try to simplify things and, figure out what's the main story, what are sort of side stories, and how can we visualize this. And often I think text is one way of explaining, but, as an exhibition designer, it's interesting to try to think about other visual ways to affect people's understanding or just experience.
It's quite amazing. I suppose going back to wayfinding, how crucial was the implementation of the wayfinding for you and your team? Now we've got lots of spaces. There's a collection to see. There's temporary exhibitions to see.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that people successfully find their way to those places. But also the wayfinding and signage has to almost say something about the museum experience, but be functional.
Yeah.
And I just wondered how that fitted in.
For us, it was very important. I mean, we want our visitors to understand and to find what's on offer. And we know that people can get annoyed and tired. And I think what's a little bit special for our museum is that it's fairly large, that kind of that has an impact on your experience, because you can get tired from, just walking a long distance. It becomes maybe even more important to make sure that people know that they're on the right way. They don't want to, lose energy. We want them to focus on the art experience. And we also want the signage to work, like you said, with the layout of the building, the architecture, the aesthetic component is also important. And also the functionality, like some of the sign elements we knew we would have to change, maybe even almost like on a daily basis, using some digital signage, of course, but also like magnets and more analog, still flexible systems. Yeah,
I think flexibility is really important. And I think we had conversations really early on about flexibility, because you've got a changing program, and the light hall enables you to have 3 temporary exhibitions in it. You've got temporary exhibition space on 2 other floors.
Yeah.
and a constantly changing program. So that level of flexibility was really key. And hopefully we made that work for you in a way that you needed it to.
I think so. But I think if I was to do this all over again, I would tell people to think about flexibility, because you're never going to know exactly what you need until you've tried it for a while. And I like the thing about our system that, we have frames, physical frames, where we can change the board and like parts of the element without having to change the entire sign, which makes it easier to change elements as we move along too. And now I'm not thinking about the signage that was made to be super flexible, but the more permanent signage as well.
Yeah, so maybe making the permanent more flexible would have been a better thing to do.
It's some hard choices, Yeah, because you want it to look very good.
Absolutely.
But also be flexible,
Yeah, no, I totally understand. So can you describe for me the collaborative efforts with curators, historians, marketeers, and other stakeholders to ensure that you get this cohesive connection to the broader collection and overarching theme?
Yeah, that's a really big question.
That's a huge question.
Yeah, for a museum that covers like art, architecture, and design.
Yeah.
But I think like in many ways, it's actually our visual identity that brings it all together in the way we communicate. And that could be both in the building as well as on other digital platforms. And actually, we're going through the visual identity is going through a refresh as we speak. Yeah.
Okay.
After some experience, we are sort of tuning things down a little bit, and it's becoming simpler, which is really interesting. And we're also working on sort of like a language for look and feel in all our public spaces that'll guide, purchasing new furniture perhaps, or picking a color or a finish for something so it stays cohesive. That's important.
Is that I imagine that's quite a big challenge in a new museum. There's this sense that it gets built, and the interiors get designed, and everyone goes, "That's it, done." But actually, that's not the life of a building. And things change all the time. And I wonder if that's one of the big challenges is defining. Now you've got this new museum, is defining how you keep it in a way that it needs to be and how it needs to express itself.
I think that's a really good point, because I think what sometimes is a little bit hard is to know who has the responsibility of being that person, or having that role that kind of keeps it all together. Because it involves people that are working, the front end staff. It could involve designers and more the maintenance crew. So what we're doing now is that we have almost weekly meetings with those different staff members that come together and can actually solve, very concrete problems as they arise, which they do. So that's one way of just sort of going through everything. But there also needs to be some more sort of strategic long-term planning, For instance, when it comes to the exhibitions, we're also working on exhibition strategy. It's on the horizon here, so to support our vision and to make sure that we have a good balance of nice variety of exhibitions covering, art, architecture and design.
That's really interesting. When designing temporary exhibitions, in addition to the permanent displays, what factors are taken into account regarding wayfinding to ensure visitors have the best experience?
Yeah, I love this question because it kind of brings together, my old passion for exhibition design with my new interest for wayfinding.
All the things.
And I think, with exhibition design, you can create a very physically sort of forced path. Either in the building or with elements that you put inside exhibition spaces, or you can have a more open-ended experience. And usually I think we do something in between. Exhibition designers, I think, tend to want to keep it fairly strict, while, curators want it to be more open-ended, and they don't want to force an experience, but that creates a lot of interesting discussions actually. But I also think that at the bare minimum, I think like a sense of arrival is very important when you get to an exhibition. Sort of like, I just enter this new world. Like, what is this about? And I think it's great if we can give people a sense of, entry and exit and how to get from A to B in a way. And then in between the entrance and the exit, we have a lot of different tools and tricks, to move people through the space. We could use sight lines to draw people from one spot to the other using the art, or maybe color or lighting. And we can use tricks to kind of speed up motion maybe, or we can make people slow down. You can use seating. You can have more interactive experiences. So there's lots of opportunity. And a map can also be a really simple and great tool actually, or a map in an app, which is what we're doing for the permanent displays.
Well, I mean, all of the things that you just said are exactly the things that we try to do as wayfinding designers. So it's really, maybe we should swap roles and see what happens just for a short time.
That'd be fun.
Absolutely. But I think, seriously, we do exactly the same thing. What's the sense of arrival?
Right.
What are you trying to achieve in this space as a human being? And then how do you move people around? And we talk all the time about it not just being about the signs.
Yeah.
So when you talk about sight lines and how you move people around using placement of art and all of those things, it's all the things that we think about.
Yeah.
So I think in a way, those connections are actually really, I don't know, it's just really nice.
Yeah.
And I suppose it shows how wayfinding design does kind of go into other areas, and probably also why you were so good on the wayfinding project, because you think like that anyway, because that's a part of what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it reminds me of, what we used to talk about, the information you provide too, like how much information should you provide and at which location. That's really interesting to me too, like, you just want to create some curiosity in the beginning before you actually like hammer people with a bigger story, and I think there are some similarities between exhibition design and graphics and wayfinding.
Definitely.
In that sense.
I wonder, do you get an opportunity as a part of the exhibition design to test how well it works and to do some evaluation?
Yeah, actually we have a new person on board who just started working here last week. So I'm really excited about working with him. And, because we always evaluate an exhibition, but now we will be able to focus more on the visitor experience.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting because we obviously talk about evaluation, and we came back and evaluated the wayfinding at the museum. But I always think, it's great to do more of it. And I wondered how much of it you do as part of exhibition design, because I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah. I think we need to, it's a little bit hard to evaluate an exhibition you worked on yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to have another person help out because you need to be a little bit objective and see the larger perspective in a way.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Project schedule, that's a difficult question. What were the challenges on the project schedule? I'm imagining COVID was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it was. a small one. It happened.
It did.
It did. So it slowed things down a little bit. And there were some issues with deliverables in the building project, but that was actually good for us because then we gained a little more time. But I think that the signage and wayfinding project worked out fine in terms of progression and reaching the goals. But I'm really happy that we started with a proper strategy and, spent a lot of time on the content before we started even designing anything, because in retrospect, I can really see that that's what made things work as smoothly as they did.
I think it's really important, the strategic approach, and as you said earlier, things around naming and how people have lots of opinions, lots of stakeholders, people coming at it from different perspectives. I think it's a really important place to start. So it is really good to know that you felt that worked for it. But you did finally get to open the museum, and it's been nearly 2 years. So have you got any highlights from opening day? Was it really emotional?
The king and the queen were there.
Yay.
Yeah. It was actually, the weather was really bad. It was like windy and gray, dramatic. But at a certain point, it sort of just like opened up and the sun came through. Maybe that's just in my memory, but I think it actually happened. And it was really exciting to be standing on the inside, seeing the long line of people,
I bet.
being ready to enter. And there had been so much talk about the museum, like, you just have to come inside and see what it's really like. So when people started coming through, it became alive, which is always is with the museum. Like, it's kind of dead when there are no people there. You need people.
Definitely.
And it was fun to see them spread out slowly through the building and finding their way.
Yeah, and starting to see how everything comes together. Because as you say, you probably had an amazing understanding of the building by that moment. You knew it inside out, upside down, back to front. But to suddenly see people come in and it was all new must have been a really special moment.
Yeah, it was great.
I mean, I feel emotional hearing you talk about it. So I can't imagine.
Yeah, once in a lifetime, and we've been working on it for so long.
Yeah.
So it was very exciting.
Absolutely, it was completely incredible. And then since opening, and I guess this probably plays into some of the things you just talked about, but how do you assess the success of visitors' ability to navigate and engage with the collection?
Yeah, because we have, worked there a couple of years, but we've been listening to visitors and also listening to the front end staff who meet visitors all the time. And also through the evaluation we were able to do with Endpoint, we have actually learned that the system is fairly robust, which is good. I mean, we're moving a lot of people through the building every day.
Yes.
Using the signage, of course, it's a big part of it, but also the app. And we have a great front-end staff, lots of hosts that will help visitors. So all in combination is working fairly well. But, we still have it's a big building. It's a complicated building with more than one entrance, different ways of getting up through the different floors.
Yeah.
So there's still work to do, of course. Based on the evaluation we did, we have, created a list.
There's always a list.
There's always a list. And, there's a big focus, as you know, on the outdoor signage, which needs some improvement. We've also been talking a lot about sort of moving things around a little bit, that it's important with both people, actually, hosts and signage, at that point when visitors are actually making the choice of what to do.
Yeah, I think that's really key. And it was really lovely to come back and do the evaluation and help everybody understand what's working and what's not working. And I also want to say that the hosts are incredible. They're amazing. And, it is a really incredible space to move around as well. I mean, the museum is beautiful. I mean, I'm sure you know that, but
Thanks.
It is absolutely beautiful, and the objects are incredible. The set out is amazing. I was wondering whether you could tell us a little bit about who the audience of the museum is and whether there's been any changes in the types of people that come now that you've been open for the last 2 years.
So it's a public museum, which means that we're a museum for the whole of Norway. That's actually really important. We have digital platforms too, so people can see some pictures or experience parts of the exhibitions, even though they can't be there physically. But we're here for all of Norway, as well as tourists and all kinds of visitors. And then, of course, an art museum can feel a little bit elitist. We know that. So there's always a process of opening up more, which we try to do through a strategy, maybe focusing on specific target audiences, always young people and families, but a lot of school classes, of course. And then we also want to open up for people with all kinds of backgrounds. So you should feel welcome to the museum. But that's an ongoing process to have that change. I think a lot of people that, I don't have the numbers, but a lot of people that never visited the museum before came after the opening because it was something new and exciting. But, we still have to work hard on keeping it up with a variety of programming to make it interesting and reach out.
Absolutely. I think that's all really interesting. And I think the digital aspect is really interesting, as I think there are some people that say, digital technology is getting so good. Why would you need to set foot in a museum when you could just put on a headset and you're there? And I think that having that crossover with digital is really interesting. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think it's really interesting.
We have the technology is really good. Like the pixels, when you can actually zoom in really close to see the artwork. But given all of that, I think it's really important to work on the story. What's so important about this art piece, or why should you care? To create some context around everything that's on offer. But I think people also find it really fun to kind of poke into the collection, and there's like an interface where you can create your own sort of collection based on elements from the collection.
I'd like to do that. I think that would be great.
But, I feel like I'm sort of walking on thin ice because there are other people that can talk about this better than me.
No, but I think it is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think as you say, museums, you don't want it to appear elitist. You want it to be open for all. Also, the experience of going out and being in a museum compared to the digital experience, they're different things, and they're doing different things for different people. So I think it's really interesting.
We also just had a collaboration with the National Ballet in Oslo, and we sort of used one of the Brudeferden I Hardanger is like one of the national romantic art pieces that everybody knows about. And this piece was sort of like the backdrop of a dance, starting out with an old dance that was created 100 years ago. That was, traditional ballet. And then it sort of merged into like a contemporary dance, including some like folk dance elements. So that was really fun. And doing that kind of stuff, it makes things come alive.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It changes the context for people.
But maybe not so much about wayfinding. You're looking at the bigger picture of things, yeah.
But yeah, it is really interesting. I guess one thing I just want to ask is, have you got a favourite spot in the museum, a place that you like to go to more than anywhere else? Or are you not allowed to have a favourite?
I think it's actually the roof terrace, which is very nice. It's not always open actually, but mostly in the summer when the sun is out, and you can see the harbor, and you feel like you're really connected with the city, even though you are in like your safe space up on the roof terrace looking down. So it was really interesting to me because I grew up in Oslo. I lived here for a large part of my life, and I know the city, but when we created this museum, all of a sudden you can see it from a different angle. Absolutely. From a different viewpoint, which I like about it. Yeah,
that is amazing, and it's a really lovely place to end it. And I think I just want to say that it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. It was an absolute pleasure working with you, and I think some of the reason why the Wayfinding project was so successful was that everybody was a designer, and everybody sort of spoke the same language and cared about it in exactly the same way, and there was something quite magical about that. The same with working with Metric. I think there was something really lovely about the interactions. So I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for today. Thanks for talking to us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really nice to talk to you as well. And I think it was really fun to make that connection between exhibition design and wayfinding.
Absolutely. So anytime you want to come and join us, you're always welcome.
Although wayfinding is hard.
Exhibition design is hard too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our latest Wayfinding Xchange podcast. Stay tuned for further episodes and feel free to contact us with any questions and suggestions for future episodes.